If you would have told me years ago that Dakota Johnson of 50 Shades fame would be mentioned alongside actresses like Jennifer Garner and Halle Berry, I would have told you you're crazy. And then I saw Madam Web, and now it all makes sense. What's up, my dude? Your friendly neighborhood Tony here, and as I do with all my movie reviews, I'm gonna give you a little bit of information about Madam Web, who made it, what it's about, all that good stuff. Then I'll go into the things I did and did not like about the movie, the pros and cons. And finally, I'll let you know who I think Madam Web is for, if anyone. If that kind of thing sounds cool to you and you want to keep up to speed on all the new big movies that are coming out in theaters and on streaming, make sure you subscribe. All right, let's get you up to speed with a quick plot summary off of IMDb. In Madam Web, Cassandra Webb develops the powers to see the future. Forced to confront revelations about her past, she forges a relationship with three young women bound for a powerful destiny, if they can survive a deadly present. Madam Web is an action sci-fi comic book movie based on the character of the same name from the Spider-Man universe of comics. This movie is written by Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless, who also wrote such hits as Gods of Egypt, Dracula Untold, and Morbius. It's directed by S.J. Clarkson, whose name you might not be familiar with. She's directed a bunch of TV shows over the years and was the showrunner for the very short-lived Game of Thrones spinoff that was then canceled after the first episode was shot. So some interesting choices for the studio as far as writing and directing. The movie is in theaters this Valentine's Day, or tomorrow, or today if you're watching this tomorrow in the future. It's all connected in a web. And it's rated PG-13 for some violence, of course, and a bit of language. The movie runs just shy of 2 hours long, which might be 2 hours too long for some of you. And it stars, of course, Dakota Johnson as Madam Web, as well as Sydney Sweeney, who you probably know from Euphoria or White Lotus. Celeste O'Connor is also in there. She's in the more recent Ghostbusters movies, Afterlife, and the upcoming Frozen Empire. Rounding out the trilogy of young lady sidekicks for Madam Web is Isabela Merced. She actually played Dora the Explorer in that live-action movie, which I never saw. The villain in the movie is played by Tahar Rahim, who is a French actor that's won a bunch of awards. It seems like he's doing pretty well. And there's some smaller but still kind of important roles by Adam Scott, Emma Roberts, and Mike Epps. So okay, before we get into my pros and cons, let me let you know my expectation going into the movie, so you know where I'm coming from. Now, I'm not gonna lie, everything I have seen about Madam Web prior to watching the movie itself has led me to believe that it was most likely not gonna be that good. Now, I will say Spider-Man is one of my favorite comic book characters and has been since I was a little kid, way back in the 90s with that Spider-Man animated series, but I haven't really been a fan of any of the Spider-Man spin-off movies. The first Venom movie was okay in my book, but the rest have been kind of meh for me. Surely though, they can't just keep putting out crap. I want to believe that Sony is trying to make good movies. So at the very least, I went into Madam Web hoping that if it couldn't be great, it would at least be so bad that it's great. But was it? Well, let's get into the pros. Okay, the first big pro that I'll mention is the overall concept of Madam Web's powers. Now, of course, that's not something necessarily unique to the movie itself, but I do think the concept of a character who can predict the future ever so slightly, and yet if you go back to the comics is kind of limited by her own physical abilities. I thought that was an interesting concept. And the way they kind of play that in this movie, almost like a Final Destination, if you've seen any of those movies, I thought it was interesting. I thought it was well done, although it can kind of fall over into her being a little too OP, a little overpowered. So that was a concern. Another thing is that structurally, as far as a plot is concerned, the movie works. And I know that sounds silly and simple, but there have been far too many movies lately that fundamentally fail as a story. And this, for what it's worth, in that way, doesn't fail. It has its setup, it has its delivery, and all the pieces along the way, whether or not you like them, do make sense and it does work. There were also some decent action sequences throughout the movie. Now, of course, this is not your typical Spider-Man movie or Avengers movie. It's not gonna have any of these groundbreaking, world-ending fight sequences, but what they did do with kind of the more thriller elements of the movie, I feel like were pretty good. Again, nothing that blew me away, but overall, there are a number of scenes in the movie, action sequences to be specific, that are memorable. Also, although I'm sure this won't work for everyone, I did kind of enjoy some of the nods to the bigger Spider-Man universe. I won't spoil any of them, of course, but there are a few nods to Peter Parker and to what would become the Spider-Man that we've seen. So I appreciate, for the most part, the way that they tied this into that world. And again, though, that might not work for everyone. So let's go ahead and get into some of the things that I think didn't work with this movie with the cons. But before we do, I want to let you know that this video is sponsored by you. That's right, I'm just a small independent channel here without any big corporate sponsors or anything anything like that. So just by watching the video, you're really helping me out. If you want to be super dope and show your support in the easiest possible way, do me a solid and like the video, and maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what are some of your favorite Spider-Man spin-off Spider-Man universe movies. For me, I think it's definitely going to be the first Venom, but who knows, maybe the upcoming Kraven the Hunter will do it for me. You can also now join as a channel member if you want to help support me financially, or just subscribe for free if you want to keep up to speed on all the new big movies coming out. Either way, whatever you do, I appreciate it. All right, on to the cons. And this movie started off immediately from the first scene. No bueno. The dialogue right away, not just the dialogue in the way that it's written, but in the way that it's said, was so clunky. It felt like somebody just wrote this script in an afternoon at a coffee shop, and the next morning they just started shooting it. And like I said, the way that the dialogue was delivered was so wooden and dry. So it kind of becomes hard to tell if the dialogue itself is written that bad, or if just all of a sudden everyone in this movie is a terrible actor, which I find hard to believe because a lot of them are decent, if not good actors and actresses. But I guess there's only so much you can do when you're given a crap script. Truly, I cannot tell you how many times throughout the movie a character just spilled out exposition in the most clunky way possible, or told us about their backstory, or trauma dumped on one another to be like, oh, you don't have parents? I don't have parents. I'm so sad and lonely. Aren't you? We should work together. It was just so cheesy and clunky and boring. It blows my mind that people watch this movie, because we're not watching it for the first time now. The studio, the people that work at the studio have seen this. The director, the writer, the people that edited the movie, they've all seen this movie. And none of them thought at any point that, hey, maybe this is not going to be that great. Or when they read the script to begin with, didn't think, hey, maybe we should go back and rewrite this one. It blows my mind that movies like this get made. Kind of in line with the way it was written, there are things that are set up early on in the movie that at the moment don't really seem to make a whole lot of sense. They just seem like extemporaneous scenes. But of course, you know that it's all going to come back around at the end, and all these little mundane things that they show you will become important by the end of the movie. And you see that coming from a mile away. There's also just some massive logic holes throughout the movie. I won't spoil anything, but I will tell you that there is a character that is trying to avoid being seen. They don't want to be caught on any kind of like security cameras or anything like that. And so they then hop on an international flight from New York 2 years after 9/11. And I guess there's just no cameras in the airport, but I guess they just needed to make that scene happen so they'd hope that no one would notice. Also, the villain in this movie, both the way that he is acted and written, and also his logic, his reason for doing things, is so terrible. And like I mentioned before, the actor that plays him is supposed to be a really good actor. I mean, I haven't seen him in anything really prior to this, but he's supposed to be really good. So how he is so bad in this, I have no clue. There's also scenes where it's so clear that his dialogue is being dubbed over, and that happens all the time, right? Sometimes you're in a scene, you're shooting it live on the day, and there's background noises, or maybe your dialogue just isn't quite as clear as it needs to be, and so they have to go back and do what's called ADR, or additional dialogue recording. That's normal. That happens all the time. But in this movie, there are scenes where his mouth is not matching what is being said. I thought I was going crazy for a second there, but it's legit, which tells me that when making this movie, they truly just did not care. They just wanted to pump this movie out and hope they can make a few bucks on it. Aside from that, there was a few other things. The camera movement I thought was weird and clunky. They did a lot of these panning shots for no reason, or they would have shots from angles that didn't make any narrative sense. Like they would shoot a scene from under a table for no reason. I don't know why. There was also a ton of product placement for Pepsi, which just became fun for me at a certain point to try to see all the different Pepsi cans in the shot. Or I think you can see this in the trailer, but they have this massive scene under a giant neon Pepsi sign. It's insane. All right, last up is just a funny con, and that is that the movie largely takes place in Queens. And there's a scene where a character is going from Queens to Poughkeepsie. And during that process, she somehow ends up at Grand Central Station. Now, I'm sure they wanted to have a scene at Grand Central Station because it's beautiful there and there's a lot of cool stuff you can do. But logistically, that makes no sense. If you're going from Queens to Poughkeepsie, you just take the F to the 6 and straight shot there. So I don't know. I thought that was a little silly that, okay, you want her to have this scene at this location, then rewrite it so that it makes sense for her to be there. But that's just me nitpicking. That's not that big a deal. It's probably not going to bother that many people. So, okay, Who do I think Madam Web is for? Well, look, I'm not gonna front. This is not a good movie. It is not good at all in almost any measurable way, but it might still be fun, at least for some of us. For me, would I pay to see this movie in theaters? No, probably not. Most likely not. However, would I maybe want to watch Madam Web with a group of friends and have a few drinks and just laugh at how dumb it is? Yeah, all right. For me, though, the thing that upsets me the most is Sony and the fact that they are just pumping out these movies that they're barely putting any effort into in an attempt to just make a few bucks. And as irritating as that is to me, I kind of get it. If we keep buying tickets to these subpar movies, they'll keep making them. But of course, this is all just my thoughts, my opinions. If Madam Web sounds like fun to you, check it out in theaters this Valentine's Day. If you've seen it already, let me know what you think in the comments below. And of course, if you want to keep up to speed on all the new big movies coming out in theaters and on streaming, make sure you subscribe. All right, my dude, I'll catch you in the next one. Be good.